Hello guys, welcome back. Here we are for summarizing the part 1. I mean whatever we have done in the part 1 of our course project, we will summarize that. Okay, so far we worked on very basic setup of our course project where we created a new Rails application, installed Bootstrap using CSS bundling Rails, we added device gem and the device user model, and also searching for user using city and country attributes. Okay, we also saw how to generate fake data using faker gem, and then we added user details page and saw how to work with custom and non-resource route. Okay, now it's time to move to second part of the course, and here we will see how to work with stimulus hotwire and the important rails association. The second part can play a crucial role in the learning if you want to extend your skills in hotwire and understanding rails association. But before switching to the next part of this course, let's revise the steps that we have done so far. So here I'm going to show you some important questions that can help you from interview point of view. Okay, so let's start from the questions. So the first question is like, if you are a fresher, then one can ask you that what is Rails. Okay, so Rails is a web application development framework, and it is very productive web application development framework where you can create a monolithic Rails application, and you can create API only application that you can use for creating microservices. Okay, and Rails provide you uh, the web development framework in MVC architecture. Okay, now the next question is that what do you mean by MVC architecture of Rails and how it works? Okay, so far we created Rails application, we generated models, and we created controllers and view templates as well, but we haven't go through that what MVC actually is. Okay, so let's visit right now that what is MVC architecture. So here you can see that right now I am at the index page or the landing page of my application. Okay, so we will start understanding the MVC architecture and how it works through this page first. Okay, so first switch to the terminal and make some space there. Okay, so here you can come and make some space into the terminal. Okay, and now try to refresh the browser. Okay, so whenever you refresh the browser, you will see on the terminal that a new request is coming on the web server. Okay, that means in MVC architecture, that Rails support, what happened that whenever a user make a request, the first request comes to the web server. Okay, and here you can see that our request is coming to the server, and now once the request arrived at the server, it's the Rails router who identifies that what request is coming and how to serve this request. Okay, so here you can see that what we are getting is started get slash means that request is coming at the root path. Okay, and now here you can see that processing by home controller index action as HTML. Okay, that means that our request is coming as HTML format, and it is processed by the home controllers and served by the index section of the home controller. Okay, and here you can see in the routes file that open the routes file first. Okay, so in the route files, what we can see that we defined a root path. Okay, and then home hash index. It means whenever you send a request to the root path your application, it will come to the home controller first, and then it load the template of or render the template of index action. Okay, and you can see this home controller here. So we have controller implemented here. Okay, and so this is how routing work. I mean, when the user send a request to the server, then the router first identifies that which controller to load and which action to serve the request. Okay, so here you can see it loads the home controller and it is served by the index section of the home controller. Okay, and now you can see that we created a home directory into the app views. Okay, so whenever you create a controller and you want to serve some GET request in a monolithic application or in a full stack application, what you need to do that first you need to define a same directory with the same name of your controller. Okay, so here you can see that we have a controller name that is home. So we created a new view directory into the views. Okay, that is with name home. Okay, and now you can see that inside the home directory we have a template index.html. Okay, and this template is rendered whenever a request come to the home controller's index action. Okay, so just like we created the same name as the controller name, and if we want to render any template on the browser, then we need to make the template file with the same name. Okay, and here now you can see in the terminal that whenever it is processed by the home controllers index section, you can see that it is rendering inside the layout application.html. Okay, by default, if you do not have any custom layouts in a Rails application, every page, every action is rendered within the layouts application.html.erb, and you can see that layouts directory in the app views. Okay, and here you can see that we have different layouts like mailer.html.erb and application.html.erb. So what does it mean? It means that whenever you send a request to any controller action, it is processed within the application layout, and whenever you send an email, then it is processed within the mailer.html.erb. Okay, and here you can see the application.html.erb template layout, and here you can see the mailer layout. Okay, since we did not work on email so far, so we did not use that mailer.html.erb, I mean the mailer layout, but we worked with our application.html.erb, so we can see this layout. And here you can see that we rendered the we added the container classes, row classes, and call lg 10 classes, and we rendered some header and footer partial. Okay, so this is all rendering within the application layout. Now for example, let's comment out this rendering syntax. So here we can comment out the render shared partial, save it, and now come to the browser and refresh your page. And when you refresh the page, you can see that we commented out the header from the application layout, and now we cannot see the header anymore on the browser. Why? Because by default it is rendered within the application layout, and we commented out the uh, we commented the render header partial syntax from here. Okay, and now come to the server again, and here you can see that it is rendering home slash index.html.erb within layouts application. Okay, so first your layout will be rendered on the browser, and then your actions template will be rendered inside that layout which is rendered. Okay, and then you can see user load. Okay, so whatever is written in your template code is rendered and performed in the controller action. Okay, so here you can see you can see a query that is user load, select users from users, order by users, created it, ascending, limit 16. Okay, and you can see that we wrote this query inside the home controller. Okay, so open the home controller. Oh sorry, let me open it again. So open the home controller, and here you can see that we applied range check on the user model, and then we are limiting it to 16 records, and we added order by clause, that is order created it. Okay, so it means that now your controller action is communicating with the model. Okay, so what we can say that a request first come to the controller, and then whatever you written in your controller action, it decides that whether to invoke model in that communication or not. Okay, since we are trying to access all user records here, so it is communicating with the user model, or it is communicating with the database. Okay, so now our model is in communication. Okay, so and after executing this query, you can see that what we did, that we rendered home slash index.html.erb. Okay, so once it is communicated through the model, then our template is being rendered on the browser. Okay, so this is how MVC work. Okay, and MVC full stands for model view controller. Okay, but controller is the mediator between the model and views. Okay, so first, let me repeat it again. First request come to the server, then server send this request to the dispatcher, that is our router. Okay, and then router defines or router identifies that which controller will serve this request. Okay, and based upon the implementation of that controller action, our template being rendered on the browser. Okay, and it decides whether to do communication with active record model or not. For example, let's comment out both the lines. Okay, let's comment out both the lines, and open the index.html.erb from. So here you can see that this is our index.html.erb. Now for example, let's remove everything and save the file. Okay, and now if you refresh the browser, and you will see only header and footer on the page, no data is here. And now you can visit on the terminal that this time no active record query is performed here, or no communication with the model. Okay, why? Because we have implementation of action controller action like that. So you can see in the home controllers index section that right now we are not making any query to the user model. Okay, so this is how it works. So let's undo this again and come to the index template and undo the changes here as well. Okay, save it and now refresh your browser again, and now you will see the data again, and into the terminal you can verify that it is now again communicating with the model. Okay, so this is how MVC architecture works in Rails. Okay, now let's switch to the second question. So the next question is, what is controller in Rails? Okay, so as we discussed with MVC, and we know that controller acts as a C in the MVC. Okay, and it acts as a mediator between model and views. Okay, so whenever a request come to the controller decide whether to invoke the model in that communication or not, and then it renders the view template. Okay, and sometimes it also redirects on different actions as well. Okay, based upon the HTTP type of the request, whether it is get request or whether it is post, patch and delete. Okay, so for example, if you are serving the request as patch, post or delete, then controller action will redirect you on a separate page, okay, or a different page. And if you are sending get request, then your controller will render a template with the same name as the action name. Okay, so this is how controller works in Rails, and this is what is controller. Okay, and all the controllers in Rails applications are inherited by application controller, and you can see this in our code. So here you can see that we make this home controller. Okay, and it is inherited by application controller by default. Okay, and you can see that we have a member controller as well, and this member controller is inherited by application controller as well. Now you can see the application controller, it is inherited by the action controller base, which has all the libraries to support the controller request and params and all that. Okay, so this is what the controller is. Okay, and how controller works. And when you define a controller, if you have any request that need to be served as a HTML template, then you need to make a directory with the same name as the controller in the app views. Okay, and then you need to mention your template files there. Okay, so now let's switch to the next question. Our next question is, what do you mean by Rails routing? Okay, this can be an important question, that it is very useful to use routing, or it is very important, and you can say it is necessary or mandatory to use routing in Rails, because without routes you cannot invoke your controllers, and without routes you cannot render any template. Okay, so whenever you create a route, or whenever you send a request in a Rails application, or in any web application, it first find a route that will serve that application. Okay, and you can also say this as URL. Okay, so let me show you in the browser. So here you can see that right now we are at localhost 3000. That means we are on the local root page of our application. Okay, and you can verify it in the uh, routes.rb. So here you can see that it is how we define our root page. Okay, and we also created a custom route that is member/id. So now let's click on any view profile button. If you click on a view profile button, and then you will change that, you will see that a routing will be changed. Okay, and it is now redirected on a different route, and different template has been served, and you can verify it in the terminal as well. So now you can see that now routing is get member/1, and it is processed by member controllers show as HTML, and we are also sending a parameter as ID into the request as well. Okay, so what we did, that we have a controller for the members, and then we defined some routes in the routing file, and you can see that route in the routes.rb. So here we defined these routes. Okay, so these are all custom routes. If we wish, we can define our resource routes as well, member and collection routes as well, and we will definitely do all these things in upcoming lectures. So right now just consider that what is routing. So routing is something where that will help you, or that will invoke your controllers to render templates on the browser. Okay, and it captures the user's request. Okay, and based upon those requests you will know that which controllers to load, and how to perform, and which actions to be performed. Okay, and also note one more thing, that whenever you mention a route in the routes.rb, you need to mention its HTTP verb as well. Okay, here you can see that we have get route. Okay, that means this action be used for information retrieval only. And for example, if you have post route, that means it is used for submitting some data or submitting some form or creating a new resource on the server. If you have route of patch type, that means you are trying to update a record on the server or update a resource on the server. You can use delete type of routes to delete a resource from the server. Okay, so this is how routing work, and this is what is routing. Now let's come to the next question. So our next question is, what are partial in Rails? Okay, and we saw the uses of partial. Okay, so what are partials? So partials are the templates which can help you to manage view chunks in simpler format. Okay, for example, let's see the usability of partial. So here you can see that in the shared directory, what we did, that we created header and footer partial, and we are displaying header and footer partials on every page of our application. That means we are trying to reuse the header and footer partials. Okay, so whenever you want to reuse your view chunks or view code, you create a partial. Okay, so this is what partial. And how to use partials in the Rails? So you need to define the partials first with name starting with underscore character. Okay, make sure that whenever you define a template as partial, you need to start its name with underscore character. And then how to use the partials? So you can see the example in the application.html.erb. What we did here in our layout, that we use render and then we provided the path for the partial. Okay, and here you can notice one thing, that we created the header and footer partials with underscore header.html and underscore footer.html respectively. But how we are rendering this, that render shared slash header. Okay, so whenever you provide path for your partial, you do not need to mention underscore there. For example, if you mention underscore here, then it will look for the underscore header.html.trb. Okay, so whenever you mention this keyword render and the partial path, it will automatically consider that you have a file that is it's starting with underscore. Okay, and with this name, whatever you provided in your partial path. Okay, now let's come to the next question. So our next question is, what do you mean by a controller action? Okay, so we saw how what is controller and how controller actions work. Now let it repeat that, what do you mean by controller action? Someone might ask you. So a controller action is an action in the controller that serves some request. Okay, that serves some request, and make sure that only public actions within a controller can be considered as the controller action. For example, here let me go through the members controller. Here you can see what we have: def show, okay, user at the rate user dot find params id. Okay, but if we update it, like for example, let's say we can copy this, we can cut this. Okay, and now what we can do here, def set user. Okay, and this, and now you can do something like this. You can call a callback. So before action, set user. Okay, so now show is the controller action, but set user is not a controller action. Why? Because I told you already that only public actions or public methods in a controller can be considered as the controller action. Other than all private and protected methods will be considered as the plain Ruby methods. Okay, so here you can see that this def set user is to be considered as the method, okay, which is private, but this show method will be considered as a controller action. Okay, so whenever you create any public method in the controller, make sure you make it public only if you have a specific route for it. If you do not have any route for your public methods in the controller, it is better to define them as a private method. Okay, now let's come to the next question, but before coming to that, let's undo everything. Okay, because these before action filter actions are the separate topic, and we will understand this in the next part of the course or next module of the course. Okay, so for now, just undo everything and just keep it like this. Okay, now let's switch to the another question. And another question is that, what do you mean by instance method in Ruby, and how to use instance method in Rails model? Okay, so we know that an instance method is a method that we can call on an instance of a class in Ruby. Okay, so we created some instance method in our user model, and you can see it here. So open the user model from the app models. Okay, and in the user model you can see that we created some instance methods like name, address. Okay, and these are the class methods. Okay, so how to differ, first thing you need to know that how to differ instance method and the class method. Okay, so whenever you define a method with a name only, okay, whatever your method name is, but it is not initialized with the self dot method name, then it will be considered as the instance method. Okay, and whenever you define any method that is starting with self and then self dot method name, then it will be considered as the class method. Okay, so here def name and def address, or name and addresses, are the instance method. Okay, and self dot range checkable attribute and self dot range checkable associations are the class method. Okay, so this is how we can use instance method in our Rails models. Okay, and why these are instance method? Because these name and addresses return the complete name and complete address of one user only, or an individual user. Okay, you cannot call this name method, you cannot fetch all the names of all the users using a single name method. Okay, you need to call it individually on each user instance. Okay, and whatever we store in the database for a model's record is known as the instance of that model. Okay, since we have 1000 users in our database right now that we generated using the faker, so it means that our user model has 1000 objects or 1000 instances. Okay, and all 1000 instances of the user model can use this instance method. Okay, and these are the class method. And invoking of instance method is a and class method is a different thing. You can directly invoke a class method on the class name. For example, if you want to invoke this range checkable attribute, then how you will call that? So you will call it something like this. For example, user dot range checkable attribute. Okay, so this is how you can call class, you can call class methods. And if you want to invoke instance method, then you need to do something like this. Let's say at the rate user equal to user dot new. Okay, and then you can call this method. So at the rate user dot name. Okay, that means to access the instance method, you first need to instantiate the class. I mean, you need to create, or you need to initialize an object of the class, and then you can only call that instance method on that instance or object of the class. Okay, so this is how instance method works and how instance method we can use in the Rails. Okay, now let's come to the next question, and that is, what is device? How can you ensure whether a user is signed in or not? Okay, so what is device? We discussed that device is a gem or a library that is used to authenticate users in a Rails application, or to provide authentication feature in a Rails application. Okay, and we also discussed a device helper that will ensure for us that whether a user is signed in or not, and you can see that method in the header partial. So go to the app shared, and here you can see that in the header partial what we did, we use this device initializer method, that is user underscore signed underscore in, and it is ensuring that whether user is signed in or not. Okay, here you can see that once user is confirmed that he is signed in, then we can access the currently signed in user as current user. Okay, this is the object of currently signed in user. Okay, and if user is not signed in, then we cannot use the current user. Okay, so come to the question again. So how can you ensure whether a user is signed in or not? So we need to use user underscore signed in, or whatever our device model name is. So for example, our device model name is member, then we need to use member underscore signed underscore in with question mark. Okay, so depending upon the device model you generated, your device helper method can ensure that whether your resource is signed in or not. Okay, and then the next question is, what are the steps you need to perform to render a template from a controller? This is a very important thing. Okay, because as a fresher, for example, if you say that you have some Rails internship experience, or you have some fresher knowledge of Rails, okay, and you are trying to apply for a job, then recruiter might ask that how you perform a template rendering in the controller. Okay, so first, as we discussed in the MVC portion, that first we need to create a controller. Okay, then create a directory in the app views with the same name as the controller, and then mention all the action templates there that you want to render on the browser. Okay, for example, in the members controller we have show action. You can see that in our member action, what a member controller, what we have action show. Okay, so we created a members directory into the app controllers, and then we created a template show.html.erb. Okay, and now for example you create another action, let's say edit, and you want to render the edit template into the browser, then you need to create first the edit action into the members controller, and then you need to create edit.html.erb. Okay, and now let's come to the last question, that is what you mean by http verbs associated with a Rails route. Okay, and we already discussed this with the MVC portion initially in this lecture. Okay, so whenever you define a route, you must mention the HTTP verb to it. HTTP verbs mostly we use in a Rails application like get, post, patch, put, and delete. Okay, so patch and put both used to update a resource. There is a difference, and we will discuss this in upcoming lectures. And get is used to information retrieval. Okay, so whenever you make a get request, or whenever you send a request to the server as a get, okay, that means you are trying to fetch some information, or you are trying to retrieve some information. You are not making any changes into the server for any particular resource, or you are not updating the database. Okay, so you need to use get. And if you want to save a new resource, or you want to create new resource, then you use post request. Okay, and if you are trying to delete a resource or delete something from server, then you are sending delete as http verb, or delete request. Okay, so these are very basic but important question, and I hope I summarize well whatever we done so far. Okay, so try to practice better and prepare the answer for these questions. I'm sure you will feel confident after having answer for all these questions, and we will meet into the next lecture where we will start working in the second part of the course, and we will learn the hotwire stuff. Till then, tata, goodbye, take care, and stay safe.